I think we can follow this previous discussion with a little bit definitions. And I ask you to speak about yourself a couple of sentences. And after that, please say, what does capitalism mean for you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today. My name is Mary Alcantara. I'm an investor, actually, with Interactive Venture Partners. I just changed positions, so it's a little bit confusing. But I'm here. I'm American, as you can hear from my accent. My mother's side of the family is Hungarian, so I'm a dual citizen. I've been living here for 13 years, but I'm kind of representing the heart of capitalism, I guess, coming from the States. And so I should say what my definition of capitalism is. Okay, I'm also the least academic and professional, I think, in terms of the research side of this topic. But I can say that and all the views that I expressed today are not the views of my employer. I have to say that as well. I guess what I wanted to share was just a story, because I think I was really intrigued, Zoltán, by your definition of capitalism, that it's the pursuit of growth. And as a venture capitalist, that's what I'm looking for, companies that have the biggest growth potential. So I'm the bad guy, I guess, in this, in this panel. But I guess I don't think about capitalism in such stark terms. I think there's market forces that have always been in existence, there always will be, whether or not these are financially paid out or in extra time or in other kinds of costs, we'll see. For me, the question of capitalism is, what's the role of the government in the story, and how much influence, how much should the government try to cap some of these market forces or control them? And the story that I wanted to tell was, I was just last weekend in Disney World, which you could consider maybe the peak of capitalism, capitalist achievement. It was, an amazing experience, very beautiful. I don't know has anybody been to Disney World or Disneyland or any of the parks? Okay. So it's very magical. It's an amazing experience, but it feels, when you're there, you just look around and you just think about how many resources are going into this amazing experience that probably only the 1% or top 20% can even afford or ever enjoy. Does that mean that this shouldn't exist? I don't think so. I think I looked around and I felt it is a magical place. There are these magical moments. They have the people that are working there, and they're so excited to be there, and they're role-playing, and they're doing the best that they can. And I'm sure that they're not paid extra for that, but they believe in this kind of bigger mission. They're inspired to be even more than themselves. And it's kind of this, so I guess for me, capitalism is sort of this force that drives you to achieve the max. It is about growth. It is about trying to be the best that you can be. There is the dark side, of course, when this is unchecked, but I think it can also result in some very beautiful innovations and achievements, and that's what I've built my career around, and I'm excited to share my experience with you today, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, I would like to thank also for the invitation and for being here. I'm Orsolya Domaniczky, and I'm the director of the Common Sense Society in Hungary, which is an international network of organizations. We are present in 4 countries, but Common Sense Society was founded in Hungary by then university students. And we promote liberty, prosperity, and beauty. And basically, through our membership events, we discuss current affairs, current issues in public life, and debate and discuss them in the context of our Western civilization. But another additional information from my background is that I worked as a sustainability consultant for about 10 years, and currently I'm co-owner in a little company where we are doing the first large-scale permaculture regenerational development project in Hungary. So we are turning 80 hectares in rural Hungary into a blossoming, beautiful place. It is a private venture, and my company works on the mostly on the ecological and permaculture design side. So I will have a lot to say about that part too. So, but my definition when it comes to capitalism, and if there is an alternative, and or what comes after it, but my problem is with the term capitalism, and I think we are stuck in a very 20th century debate, and we have to move on to the 21st century in this. The term is very misleading. First of all, it was coined by the opponents, by utopian socialists like Proudhon, and they used it as a misnomer. It was a disparaging word to describe the system at the time that was unfolding. The second problem is that in order for me to accept the term capitalism, I would first have to accept the presuppositions of historical materialism, and I don't. That what does historical materialism say? That people's social being determines their consciousness, and the heart of the social system is the mode of production. So I don't accept that, we have on the one hand the market that is a very efficient tool for us to in production and the distribution of goods. The market was able to produce wealth, and the wealth that we are enjoying today, all of us here right now. At the same, in hand with the market, developed a very strong state, and like Zoltán talked about it, the state is really needed to ensure that the market is fair and safe, and that the rules are being kept. But there is a third area that is almost never mentioned in these debates, and that is the free association of people. People coming together voluntarily and producing public goods that would otherwise not be produced either by the market or the state. In the village where I live now, we have lots of small organizations that take care of elderly people, that provide entertainment to young people, like quality entertainment. There are the local firefighters. You cannot rely on the market or the state to just provide this for you. You also have people just wanting to create a life that is meaningful, and so we should never forget about this third realm. And when these three come together, then you can actually talk about what is the right balance between these three. And there is always a conflict between the three, but that's okay. And that's not a purely economic question that can be solved only with graphs. This is a political question that we have to tackle.
I mean, I already had my chance to talk about what capitalism is. I just want to re-emphasize that the market is not capitalism. So the market might be a great thing. The market coordinates a lot of stuff. The market might make you creative, but the market is not capitalism. There was already a market before capitalism. I really just encourage anyone to visit a museum of Egyptian art or something, and you see that there were markets there before. So it's not capitalism.
Well, as a historian, I obviously would like to debate with you, because capitalism is about free market and not just market, where free market means the seller and the buyer could make a free agreement about what they would like to sell and buy, and in which price. So basically, that's the meaning of a free market, I think, and that wasn't in the Middle Ages. So, and it's a very interesting thing as well that we can define capitalism without using the word money. And yeah, it seems to be interesting for me. But my second question would be about sustainability, which was mentioned, because we hear about degrowth, and there is another very fancy word, that's sustainability, and I would like to ask you, what do you think about this from your perspective?
Should we all go, or this was? Do you want? Well, I mean, the only thing I can say, I guess, about sustainability is that I think the market is broken, or what you said, climate change is an example of market failure, because we're not optimizing for this. It's interesting that you said this about, yeah, we can define capitalism without talking about money, but I think when we talk about growth, it is financial growth that we're looking for. And that was going to be one of my questions for you, Zoltán. Maybe we don't need to get into this now, but the 3% year-over-year GDP, that is including considering things like inflation, or I don't know if this is controlled for inflation or not, because there's a lot of creative accounting that you can do that can result in 3% year over year, so people don't freak out and have a revolt, but it's not going to result in actual 11 times growth by the end of the decade. So I think there's sort of financial growth and economic growth that gets talked about a lot, but in terms of real value that's created, I don't know what's new. I think so I believe in innovation. I think I'm not a capitalist, I'm an innovator. That's how I would define myself, to just stay out of it. But a lot of innovation is from disrupting pre-existing markets where there's been, and banking is one of them, where historically a lot of value has been captured by these few players, and now there's new disruptors that are coming in and doing something better or cheaper, even better, and then they're recapturing some of that value. So I think a lot of the growth that's created is actually a bit circular, where it's taking from the old players and coming. The circular economy is also something to think about with sustainability. And then just, I guess, lastly, this is not even related to sustainability, but about capitalism, one of the things that you mentioned, ownership, this concept of ownership. Well, there's an innovative concept called the sharing economy. Probably you have all participated in this with Airbnb or Uber, where you don't need to own things anymore to be able to benefit from them. So I think the value of ownership has also changed over time. So I think growth and value creation are not necessarily the same things. And I think having a degrowth might just be a degrowth financially, but there can still be a circular movement of value, and different players are recapturing and repurposing that value. And to me, that somehow relates to this topic of sustainability, but keeping it all in a constrained way that you're not exploiting resources as a result.
So in my introduction, I used the word sustainability, and yes, but what I want to say is that I have a lot of problems with the term sustainability for the exact reasons that I introduced in response to the earlier question. Sustainability focuses mainly on material flow, how much we extract, and then how much we emit. The whole sustainability realm has become very techno-bureaucratic. That is one reason why we said that, just cultivating the land and regenerating an actual land into something really flourishing is just so much more meaningful than working, in the consultancy business and talking about theories of sustainability. It's very techno-bureaucratic, and that's not what the whole thing should be about. The whole ecological problem is, at the heart of it lies the question of like much deeper questions. What do we value? What are we as human beings in relationship to others and in relationship to the natural world? Questions like what is a meaningful life and how can we agree as a community, as a nation, about the meaningful life. And so I would be very cautious again with the term, and then the other thing is the question that usually arises is who will solve the question? Is it the market? Is it the state? There was a book about 30 years ago by an economist, Elinor Ostrom, and with the title Governing the Commons. She was the first woman to earn a Nobel Prize in economics for that book. And there she says that neither the market nor the state have proven to be effective in solving problems in connection with the commons, the common poor resources. And she studied a number of real life examples, and she said it's not really the property type that matters. It's how that resource is managed. And there are a lot of informal arrangements that actually create that sort of structure, that sort of management system that will prove to be sustainable. Very often there is a focus on how can we, be sustainable. And the lesson that I've learned is that if you focus on sustainability, you will actually not achieve it. You have to focus on other things. One such thing is actually beauty. If you want to you pursue beauty, and a side effect of what you do will be sustainability. The proper arrangement of things. You seek the proper arrangement of things, and the side effect will be sustainability. And just one more thing in connection with this. What are the, what may be alternative arrangements that we've seen? There are eco-villages. I'm sure in your countries there are these, people deciding to leave the city and then starting a little eco-village. There have been a lot of experiments in this, and a recent study has shown that most of these eco-villages don't live very long. And one of the reasons is that people actually cannot agree on a lot of things. And then it falls apart, no matter how hard they try. The eco-villages that actually function well and on the long run have a very strong religious base. So the Krishna believers have a wonderful eco-village in Hungary. There are about 300 people there. They do eco-farming, and they've calculated that they actually use less than the carrying capacity of the land on which they inhabit. There is another example of a Christian community in Hungary. But the question is, if that's that's functioning, that's a sustainable alternative, is who else is willing to go in that direction, give up a lot of things, and join a community like this? One of the questions that the social sciences grapple with in connection with the ecological problem is how can you convince people to consume less? There is no way, I cannot convince you rationally. It's only if you take your freedom and you take it on yourself. And these religious communities have been able to do that. That's probably not an appealing option for a lot of people. So maybe there's no option. So.
Okay, what's the definition of sustainability? The generally accepted definition of sustainability is that each generation should only consume the resources which are allocated for that generation. So you don't consume the resources from the generations that come after you. That's the generally accepted definition of sustainability. Now the problem is that we do consume resources from the future. And your question about GDP growth, well, if we had 3% GDP growth, in order for material use even if you have very high inflation, the material use is still there. So you can measure GDP in terms of volume, physical volume, or you can measure it in terms of monetary value. But if you grow your economy in terms of volume, and we do, year after year, we grow our economy in terms of volume. This means more extraction of minerals, more use of fossil fuels, larger waste deposits, larger dispersion of plastics, etc., etc. So actually, we take more from the environment, we pollute it more, and it's just getting worse and worse. And we are already above the level of sustainability and have been since the 1970s. So to increase this volume 11 times over, growing at 3% a year, it's just not going to happen. That's just not a possibility. And in this sense, the concept of a circular economy is nonsensical. The circular economy just doesn't exist if you think about it, because if you extract some minerals, a lot of that is already waste. So like 60-70% of iron ore that is extracted is not actually used. It's rubbish that you throw away immediately. Then you create something of it, and the progression is that you use it, and then you reuse it, and then you downuse it, and then you burn it, you incinerate it, and then you dig it underground. But effectively, nobody uses everything over and over and over again because the material degrades, some slower, some faster. There's already waste when you're doing it. You're not consuming all of it. There's 1/3 of food is wasted in the world, etc., etc., and you're polluting while you're doing it. So this whole concept of a circular economy is basically lying to ourselves. There is no circular economy. Sustainability cannot be circular. So the problem is deeper than we think.
Yeah, I think we can use the other microphones as well. Before I open the discussion for the whole audience, I would like to ask a third big issue from you about technology. If you see into your magic crystal ball, what do you see in the future? How will technology transform the economy? For example, will we have businesses in the metaverse, or maybe we won't have jobs because of AI and so on?
Yeah. Does this one work? Okay. I don't believe in the metaverse myself, but I think, who's used ChatGPT? Have you guys? Okay. So I think we're in the beginning, midst of an AI revolution right now. The founder of OpenAI, Sam Altman, was also the founder of Y Combinator, like the most famous accelerator in the world for startups. He has a very positive view of the future. He thinks that AI will replace all labor within the decade. Basically, it's a matter of years, not decades. And he is also a big proponent of this concept of universal basic income. And maybe we can debate about this. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. But I like this idea that technology can make our lives easier, and it can free up our time for other pursuits. I don't think that there will ever be a world where that doesn't require human labor, because as you know, if you've tried ChatGPT, it's only as good as the prompts that you put into it. It takes creativity and the human brain to figure out how to extract value and how to use these AI tools to the best of our abilities. I think the labor force will just change. I don't think it's going to go away. That's my personal view. This same sort of thing happened in the Industrial Revolution, and there were people who were really afraid of this when the first machines came out, and they were going and destroying the machines. And this, I read this really interesting article about this, preparing for this panel, but the whole point is, the problem is that these technologies are being inserted in a capitalistic world. So everybody is afraid and freaking out because their way of making a living, their way of earning money is under threat. If you are a graphic artist or a copywriter, all of a sudden there's this AI that can do these things for free. So what are you to do? Well, it's hard, but you have to learn a different kind of skill, learn how to harness these tools to actually do it. But I like the idea of a universal basic income. I think there's a lot of practical issues in the implementation, which I'm sure my esteemed colleagues can tell you about. But the idea that if we separate the idea of work from making money, I think a lot of that would be a really big change and a difference from society. I don't know if that's possible, but I know as a mother, I work a lot. I work fucking hard taking care of my kids. Nobody pays me for that. I'm happy to do that, but would I get paid to do? Would I do that if I wasn't making money? I don't know. If I had a universal basic income, maybe I would join one of these free associations and spend my time for free trying to make the world a better place. It's maybe a naive point of view, but I think that's maybe the optimistic, utopian viewpoint of what could come after capitalism when our time spent working is not related to how much we make. What would you do? I don't think people would quit. Like, there's also this movement, the FIRE movement. Has anybody heard of that? Financial independence, retire early. Most of the people who become financially independent don't stop working. It doesn't mean that you retire and you go live on the beach somewhere. That gets boring after 2-3 weeks, right? We all have this internal feeling that we want to contribute to the world. If we didn't have to do something to make money, we just had money to do, no, we probably wouldn't all just quit. We would figure out some way to spend our time and our talents that would be useful. I don't think AI is going to solve all of our problems. I don't think robots are going to take over the world. I think there will always be a need for human jobs in exchange for money. But I like the idea of a future where we don't have to worry about money and we could do whatever we, like, just think about that question. What would you do if you didn't have to work for money? And that, to me, gets the juices flowing. Let's get to that point.
So whenever a new technology emerges, there is usually someone who comes up with a utopian idea about how this will solve our problems and bring salvation to all people on the earth. And then, like with social media, some people believe that this will bring about a new democracy, a deeper democracy than we've ever enjoyed. And then most of the times we are quite disappointed by how that technology at the end actually plays out. At the beginning, technologies bring disruption, bring in a lot of new opportunities for growth, not just material or economic growth, but a lot of new things. But then, the way technologies work, it's actually that in order to keep the effects of technology at bay, you need regulations. You need regulation on the corporate side, on the state side. Just think of Facebook. There are all these people at Facebook who try to keep the conversations decent. And then society also comes up with solutions to keep a certain technology within the limits of social norms. But so there is an increasing control, and then a new technology comes in, and the cycle repeats. These techno-utopias are why they are. They may be, you know, interesting. You know, it's a good intellectual venture to just think about them. You know, what would happen if? I don't know. If you can tell an example when that utopia or anything close to that utopia actually materialize, I cannot say any such example. But something that very often comes up in connection with AI is the idea that when machines take over, then we will finally be free to you know, not have to work. There will be a universal basic income, and then we can do whatever we want with our time. I'm very pessimistic that that's actually going to happen, and I have I have a lot of questions about the desirability of that. Work is not a terrible thing. You may have a terrible job. That's true. And then there are a lot of terrible jobs out there in the world. But then work is also something that that gives our life meaning, and that is you may be paid for the work you do, or you may not be paid for the work you do, but it's work at the end of the day, and it's part of who we are as humans, as human people, that we work, and so I'm not sure that this is actually desirable at all.
Can I pick up from your question about what would happen if you wouldn't need to be making money? Because I found that an intriguing question. What would we do if we didn't have to work for money? I think that would be the end of capitalism, actually, because most of us wouldn't get a job, which actually takes us back to your previous intervention, Rudolf, about, well, you said, okay, markets don't define capitalism, there were markets before, and then you said, well, free voluntary exchange defines capitalism. Well, if there was free voluntary exchange in what you call capitalism today, 80–90% of us wouldn't work. The reason why we work, and there is empirical surveys to back this up, the reason why 4 out of 5 people work is because they need to make money. Otherwise, they wouldn't. So there isn't free voluntary exchange in this thing that you call capitalism today. We are forced to exchange our labor power, time, whatever, for money. I actually believe that robots and algorithms, not only are they going to take over our jobs, they have already taken over our jobs. And there's plenty of examples of that happening. You don't really have to go very far. And I can show you plenty of examples in Budapest of this happening. You just have to, I don't know, can I say names of corporations on this panel? You just have to go to a Decathlon store, and you see there's 0 checkouts in the Decathlon stores anymore. Checkouts have been replaced by machines. There is a corporation not very far away which produces ABS panels for cars. 2 people work there, 500 people used to work there before, now 2 people work there because it's been fully automatized. I can go on and on and on about examples where algorithms and robots are already taking over our jobs. And this argument that, you know, there was this fear at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution that jobs are going to be lost to machines and that it didn't materialize. You hear that quite a lot as a counter-argument that, you know, they were afraid and it didn't happen. Well, let's look into that. Why didn't that happen? The ratio of the population that worked at the beginning of the 19th century is roughly the same as today. So on the surface, it seemed like, yes, there's no change. Some jobs went, others came. Older jobs were replaced by new jobs. Actually, if you think about it, there was almost no state sector at that point in time. So there was no universal healthcare, there was no universal educational systems, social systems, etc. So very large numbers of people actually work today for the state, which is a non-existent sector. You actually had to bring in the state to soak up a lot of that unemployment, which was actually created by machines. So machines did get rid of jobs. We soaked them up with the state. So what happened was, in the Middle Ages, 80% of people worked in agriculture. Very few people worked in industry. The local smith, basically. And a tiny, tiny proportion of people worked in services. The priests, basically, were the services. Yeah? And then from that, we went to the Industrial Revolution, where the largest proportion of people worked in factories, in industry. A much smaller proportion kept on working in agriculture. And there was a little bit of an expansion in the service sector. What we have today is about 20-something% of people in a modern industrialized economy. A modern economy works in industry. So only 1 in 5 works in industry today. The majority of, almost nobody works in agriculture. So with the single exception of France, which likes to eat good food, but apart from France, almost nowhere do you have a large agricultural sector. So something like 2-3% of people work in agriculture in a typical Western country. And the overwhelming proportion of people work in the services sector. Now, what do these people produce? Some useful stuff, but a lot of bullshit. So actually you needed to bring in an enormous amount of bullshit, which is incredibly unsustainable, which brings us back to the problem of sustainability, because these people in the service sector are producing an enormous amount of rubbish just to keep people in jobs. And if you think the service sector doesn't produce material rubbish, think about it, because what is the service sector? The service sector is tourism. In order for you guys to come here, you had to travel with something. You have to live somewhere. You have to consume food. Tourism is all about physical consumption. Facebook, you think when you're scrolling your Facebook wall, there's no physical consumption. Well, there's actually gigantic server parks humming about somewhere in the background to enable you to scan your Facebook page or your TikTok or whatever. Yeah? So even the service sector produces gigantic amounts of energy consumption, material use, and that's the cost of giving people jobs, 4/5 of which is by and large useless. That's why there was no change. So machines have taken our jobs. Look at agriculture, look at how many people used to create the food for society then, and look at how many people actually create the food today. And you realize that machines have already taken our jobs.
Would you, yeah, very, very strong words. Just a follow-up question, I guess. What do you consider work? I mean, if you weren't paid, I'm assuming you're not being paid to be here today, yet you're still here. I would still come here. Like, this is an interesting, great conversation. Thinking about these topics, I think, is important. I'm assuming you would still do this even if nobody paid you egy fillesen.
That's a wonderful question, because what was work in the Middle Ages was you basically worked on your own garden. So you had your own house, you built your own house, you built your own clothes, you farmed your own food, and then every now and then the landlord would come and take 1/10 of stuff that you produce. This is open exploitation. The landlord would, send in some soldiers and they would take away 1/10 of what you were producing. Then there was the industrial society, capitalism. When the majority of people were moved out of their homes, they were made to work in factories. So work became stuff you do outside of your home, in a factory. And then the next phase will be, once robots and algorithms take over our jobs, what shall we be left with? What we call pink jobs today. The reason why there are white-collar jobs, there are blue-collar jobs, and there are pink-collar jobs. Blue-collar jobs are the working-class jobs, white-collar jobs are the office jobs, pink-collar jobs are the jobs that are done by women today for very little money. And these are usually human-to-human jobs. And the reason why women do this is because they're underpaid. And the reason why they're underpaid is because women do it. Now, those are the only jobs which will be left for humans to do, because that's what we don't want from robots. You don't want a robot to tell you jokes. There was this meme on Facebook where there were robots which were helping, feed elderly in elderly homes. They were helping them to bathe. But they accepted all of this. What they did not accept was the robot telling them jokes. So we would need much more care work, like you mentioned, care work, creative.
I would let the robot change diapers. Just let the record show.
But that's physical work. That can happen. Physical work can happen. But what we do not want from robots and algorithms is care work for the elderly, care work for the children, creativity, sports. So potentially there would be more Zumba teachers and art teachers and that sort of thing. That's the optimistic scenario. But for that you need the universal basic income. So the only way to fund that is through the universal basic income. Otherwise, there's no social system. A capitalist social system will not do that. So you need the universal system. That's the only thing which is going to be left for us. Now, whether you want to call that work or not, up to you. I'm not sure I want to call that work, but
what about this, though? What about, I'm assuming you would still research, you would think about these, you would write on these topics. Isn't that work?
A lot of that stuff can be done by AI, actually. So,
did you use ChatGPT to write your presentation earlier?
I don't do that, but my students do it all the time. So I have no illusions that 90% of the hand-ins that I get today are written by AI. So if they can do that, research, a lot of research can be done by AI as well. So interestingly enough, AI tends to target exactly the areas where we were telling students, 5, 6 years ago, we were telling them, don't study anything which is routinizable. So whatever is physically routinizable will be taken over by the robots. Whatever is intellectually routinizable will be taken over by algorithms. To study whatever is, creative or finding the patterns or making presentations or collecting data. That's exactly what AI does. So AI is taking over more and more of those sort of intellectual jobs as well. There will be some left, but most of it will be human to human.
So go out and become a stand-up comic. That's our advice.
I guess so. It's very.
Or go be a bartender and be the kind of person that you can tell me all your problems.
Absolutely. Right? Would you want to be served by a robot there? I'm not sure I would want to be served by a robot.
Well, I can tell you the Oga's Cantina in Disney World was jam-packed, and there's droids serving you there. So we can we can go full circle on this. Sorry, I sort of took over. Okay.
It's completely perfect, and I think now is the time for the question. And if I may, I ask you if you can ask concrete people with your question, and please mention for what you did use ChatGPT, because I think it's an issue.
Okay, well, I'll start with the ChatGPT thing. I use it for learning languages. I give the prompt to ChatGPT to be kind of a tutor, reply to me in Spanish, correct me if I made any mistakes, and then write the same thing in English, so I actually understand, right? So that was ChatGPT. My question is to Zoltán, and I took notes, so I got it right. Do you think, anyone can answer really, but as long as I had an instruction, it's for Zoltán. Do you think that the developments in renewable energy is going in the right direction, considering the promising pledges of the EU, the Inflation Reduction Act in the USA, and the ambivalent opinion of energy attribute certificates worldwide? And is there a way to realize the visions in a truly sustainable way without feeding into the issues that plague modern capitalism?
It's a very simple answer. There is no major region of the world which has achieved sustainability yet. So the EU is the leader globally. We are the ones that are driving the agenda. The Chinese have done a lot. The Inflation Reduction Act is a good move in the right direction. But we, as blocs, are all very, very far away from a real level of sustainability. And as I tried to stress, we have 7 years left. So 7 years from now, we're going to reach 1.5 Celsius. And none of us are none of us are sustainable economically.
But that's exactly my concern, though, right? Like, time is ticking, and the only way that real change can be made is through for-profit investments, as Rudolf mentioned. It's for people to invest in third world countries, for example, to make sure that their development is sustainable. I find it hard to believe that there's going to be anyone, any bank, any corporation that would do so without the promise of profit.
Is Frontex for profit? Because you're already investing heavily into Frontex. If you invest non-profit into Frontex, why don't you invest into making countries livable for people who want to move away from there?
Fine, but then the question still remains that is there any way to do it without feeding into this current capitalistic approach to all these things?
As long as it is treated as a technological thing, it will feed into the same thing. You can use renewable energy, large scale, but as long as you it's within the same system. There were hopes at the beginning of the deployment of renewable technology that this will bring on a decentralized energy system. This didn't happen. That there will be, local communities building their own windmills. It has happened in some places to some extent, but it's really, really minor. And now most of the renewable energy talk is about how can we deploy renewables on really, really large scale. I don't see how that is bringing on something new if the local communities are not involved in the decision making. They are turning huge lands into solar farms. You may argue about the aesthetics of windmills, but most people who live in close proximity of windmills are actually, they report about a decreased life quality. It's not very pleasant to live in their proximity, not to mention the biodiversity problems. The windmills kill the birds. And so they bring on a lot of problems, and unless the local communities have a control over that, it's all the same. The similar thing goes with the electric cars. Now we are replacing the old cars with electric cars, but that's not a systemic change, and there are a lot of questions surrounding the actual pollution and resource use that is associated with producing the electric cars. But you will not solve a number of other problems: traffic jams, parking places, and just that our cities have been taken over by cars. There is not enough, public spaces and pedestrian areas, and so on and so forth. So whenever we talk about the renewables, it is worthwhile to think about it in what is the actual, social setting that we are embedding it into.
Yes, I would have a question regarding the universal income. What guarantees that some people won't demand more than what this actual income is? Because that's a dimension, as far as I can judge, wasn't really dealt with here. That it's one thing that where you can be created by robots or artificial intelligence if it actually works. But what stops people from demanding more than what they actually deserve? And what stops this whole scheme from failing for the same reasons communists did?
What exactly do you mean by more? Because you get a certain amount of money, or you get a free flat, or you get some food for free, and that's it. So how can you demand more?
Like, demand, for example, a better flat.
From whom?
From the state or from
I
anyone
think
else.
I understand your question. You're saying, what if people aren't satisfied
Yes.
with the universal
Yes.
basic income? I
Yes.
think that
Yes.
will happen. Nobody is saying that you're not allowed to go out and work and earn more money. The idea is that for people who would choose to just stay inside and play video games all day or whatever, and order out their food, like the idea is like to remove this very desperate below the poverty level. It's not that everybody should have the same exact standard or quality of life. I mean, then that's sort of communism. The idea is that people should be removed from poverty, and then they can choose to work to make more money and to raise their standard of life or to go on expensive vacations or whatever, but nobody should have to work to be able to live at a basic... There is some value, though. There's a value judgment there. Like, what is the right universal basic income? All of the proposals or whatever that I have seen are really not actually enough to cover your full expenses, but it's like $1,000 a month. That would take the pressure off of a lot of families so that they could just take a breath. And I think that's a great question. They don't have this figured out. I mean, this is a thought experiment, I think. What is the magic number where nobody would have to work? And how would this even be implemented practically? Who should pay for it? Should it be the governments? I've even read about things like a corporation should pay for it when they come up with a robot or an AI that replaces jobs. Then your job becomes redundant and you get an AI redundancy stipend for the rest of your life. Goodbye, you can retire. So they're trying to make it positive, like, okay, that your job is, you've been replaced. That's great. Now you don't have to work. You just get your same salary for doing nothing and you can retire. I think that's very ambitiously naive, but and that's the question too. How do you know that the value that a company is saving is going to be passed on to their employees? I assume that no, but there's still a lot to work out about this concept of universal basic income, and I think that's kind of the heart of your question. But it would be some lower level. It's not that everybody would get a six-figure salary all of a sudden and just wallow in luxury. That's not the point. The point is that you wouldn't have to work for money, but you would have to accept a certain standard of living that you're okay with for the rest of your life. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
But the idea would be that you could still make more money. So I think they're not taking away the ability to make additional money, but everybody would get the same low basic income.
Right. Okay. And what happens if people, way too many people become satisfied with this, and there aren't simply enough value produced to maintain this system?
I think that's about the practical implementation. Yeah. How do you know that there's money ideally the robots are producing all of the value for us, and then that value gets redistributed equally in this universal basic income. But I also have questions about inflation, or if everybody has that same amount. I mean, look at what's happened with different government programs. If they subsidize housing, then all of a sudden housing prices go up by exactly that much. I mean, I don't know.
Can I say something? There's a very good new book out by a guy called Daron Acemoglu, who's a Turkish-born American economist. He basically argues that every time there was technological change in the world, it first made people's lots worse before it made it better. So the Industrial Revolution actually was very, very bad for the majority of the population. And then you had to get your act together socially. So you had to organize politically to take advantage of the technological change in a widespread way for most of society to benefit. And that pattern repeats itself over and over and over again. The technological change in itself just benefits the few. For the many to benefit, you need to follow that up with social change. And that's exactly the thing with robotization as well. So the value that robots and algorithms are going to create, at the beginning, it's very likely that only the few will benefit from that. You need to organize yourself socially to spread that around. And that universal basic income is about this. It's about first trying to pick people up from the street and give them a minimal level of decency, and then try to raise that higher and higher and higher as robots take over our jobs to spread that value around and create a post-capitalist society while doing that.
One. Okay, cool. Thank you for the lecture. My question is on the universal basic income and the robots. So maybe to Zoltán, maybe to Mary in a practical way. First of all, do we have a proof that robots will like come over and take like 50% of the job of the market, like 10%? Because that's told for ages, like 100 years ago, 200 years ago, that like technology will come over and like whatever. So do we have a proofs, like research on how many percent? And the second, in universal basic income is basically like I accounted for like top 20%, top 20 economics of the world, and like there's no money for this. And like how is it like researches about can we allow it? Like
You do know that we already answered your question.
About I forgot the researchers. Like I never heard the
right,
researchers.
but the one about replacing jobs, that we dealt with that 10 minutes ago. That's already been dealt with.
Okay. Yes.
So you mentioned women and capitalism before, but what do you think? Can we end the patriarchy without ending capitalism? Because it's really, really connected.
Fuck the patriarchy. Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I think it's a really intense question. I mean, I had never heard of this pink jobs before, but I feel like those jobs are never going to be paid well. That's my feeling. Nobody's ever going to pay for that. It's always been undervalued because people do them without thinking about the money. People who are parents and caregivers and nurses, I mean, they make some sort of money, but that's not why they're doing that. They're actively choosing to spend their time that way. So I think the real question is, yes, when capitalism ends, or if we get to this point where the time that you spend working, what your effort that you're spending your time on, when that's not connected to your economic value in society, that's when that's gonna happen. But yeah, I don't know if you have a comment on that.
Ending capitalism in itself is not a guarantee for ending patriarchy. So there were plenty of other economic systems before capitalism, which are also patriarchal. You can imagine a post-capitalist economy which should also be patriarchal. So just ending capitalism is not a guarantee. That's a fight. It's a connected fight. But one thing is not a guarantee for another thing. So I think while you're in the process of creating a post-capitalist economy, it's a good occasion to make sure that this post-capitalist economy will not be a patriarchal society as well.
I can suggest you Branko Milanovic groundbreaking book, Capitalism Alone, where he wrote about this issue, that how could the constant commodification of things in the capitalist system became into an end of patriarchy. So basically in the capitalism. And the last question now.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also a shout out to this very lovely man next to me who gave me his microphone after we noticed there are very few women who are contributing to this discussion. So it's very kind. My question is actually coming back to the title of this talk. So is there another alternative to capitalism? And what worries me is even in this panel, there's very different discussions and very different opinions on what the alternative is, whether it's degrowth or whether it's innovation. And this really worries me because we all agree on the problems, but we're arguing with each other over what the solutions are. So I sort of wondered what the panel was thinking and if there's any way that we can work together a little bit more.
Wow.
We're out of microphones. I guess I can go first, but I think you said it as well. It's going to be really hard to get consensus on something like degrowth. I don't know. I think we don't know what is going to come next. I think my personal view is that there's going to be some trigger moment, either the singularity, when the robots take over the world and this superintelligence grows more than we can understand, and then we will be at this point where things will just have to change. But I think it's going to take something dramatic, or the world heats up too much in 7 years and we all explode into burning flame. Then that's going to be post-capitalism. But I personally don't think it's going to be able to be solved by an effort of grassroots organization. I think there's going to be some sort of a trigger event, and then we will all of a sudden be thrust into this post-capitalist world, and there will be a new society. But that's my view.
My answer may not satisfy you, but like I said, there are a lot of problems with what we associate with capitalism. And when you use this term, or other people from the audience use this term, I'm pretty sure that you and the three of us understood different things by the term. So it can be quite misleading. And why these discussions about the economic system that we have, the answer that we are going to have is going to have to be a political answer. So the political agreement to agree with each other about what kind of society we want is going to be a political answer.
Okay, so you're concerned about argument, but actually we're not arguing, we're discussing. And I think discussion is a good thing. So there's no argument here. It's really, to me, it's a fruitful discussion. And if we didn't have a discussion, I would feel it would be worse than having a discussion. Second thing is, I think this discussion has finally moved to the stage where we are actually discussing the alternatives to capitalism. Because if this thing happened 5-10 years ago, everybody would have assumed that you'd have to find a solution within the framework of capitalism. As the famous saying goes, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And that was the spirit of the times up until a couple of years ago. The very fact that we can have a panel on post-capitalist societies, to me, is a gigantic leap forward from what we had before. So to me, this is actually, it gives me hope rather than make me worried.
Thank you very much. Okay. So my question would be about why does universal basic income seem like such a good idea? Because it's basically like societies usually don't seem to appreciate people who don't contribute in any way to maintain that society. It doesn't really have to be work, but something. And it's like giving up all your political power for just a little bit of money. And you can think of basic universal income already existing today, like places like Saudi Arabia. Lots of petrol, oil, and then they get money. People get money. Now, I don't think that I would like to live in that kind of place. And, my value is my contribution, so why would I not contribute anything that's valuable?
I think you're making a lot of assumptions there. We kind of unpacked some of those already, but my whole point was separating your value from what you're contributing. I think what you do for work is not necessarily a financial contribution to the economy. And the idea of universal basic income it's not to reward people for doing nothing, it's to prevent people from not being able to live a basic standard of life. So anyway, we've talked about this, but I would say my whole argument with that is, what I like about that is the idea that you are not just what your potential economic contribution is. We are all worth more than that. And our value in society should be about what our contributions to that society, not economic, but in terms of making the world a better place so.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we can finish, and I wouldn't like to say any speech after this discussion. And thank you for your questions. And if you have any unraised question, maybe you can discuss it with each other, or maybe you can address it in person with the panelists. And now there will be a movie screening, as I know, and Esther?
This has been amazing. Thank you so much. Another round of applause. Thank you.